The world watches with bated breath. Tensions are rising, but this is not a conflict we've seen before. This is not a war fought with tanks and troops, with missiles and might. This is a new kind of conflict waged on a different kind of battlefield. This is the new global trade war. Forget trenches and foxholes, this battle is fought in boardrooms and on trading floors. The weapons are not guns and bombs, but tariffs, sanctions, and technology. The stakes are incredibly high, with the very future of the global order hanging in the balance. This is not just a war between nations, but a struggle for economic dominance, for technological supremacy, for the very resources that will power the 21st century. Countries are jockeying for position, forming new alliances, and rewriting the rules of the game. The old order is crumbling, and from its ashes, a new world order is emerging. But who will shape this new world? Who will be the victors, and who will be the vanquished? The answers to these questions will have profound implications for every single person on the planet. Gone are the days when nations settled disputes through brute force alone. Today, battle lines are drawn in the global marketplace. Tariffs and sanctions are now weaponized, protecting industries and punishing rivals. These economic weapons can cripple economies and drive up prices. The interconnected global economy means a single shot can be felt worldwide. This is not just about economic advantage, however. This trade war is ultimately about something far more fundamental: power. In an increasingly multipolar world where the balance of power is shifting, nations are using trade as a weapon to secure their place in the new global order. China, with its rapidly growing economy and its ambition to become the world's leading superpower, is challenging the United States' long-held position of economic dominance. The European Union, eager to assert its own independence and influence, is caught in the middle, trying to navigate a path between these two titans. But the stakes go beyond just geopolitics. This trade war is also a battle for the technologies that will shape the future. Artificial intelligence, robotics, quantum computing, 5G. These are the keys to economic prosperity and military might in the 21st century. And nations are willing to go to extraordinary lengths to secure their dominance in these critical areas. The battle for technological supremacy is playing out in research labs, on factory floors, and in the halls of government. It's a battle with profound implications for the future of humanity. In this new era of great power competition, the weapons of war are no longer just tanks and missiles, but also microchips and algorithms. Control over critical technologies like semiconductors, rare earth minerals, and artificial intelligence has become paramount. Countries are investing heavily in research and development, racing to secure patents, and implementing export controls to maintain their technological edge. This technological arms race is fueling the trade war, as nations scramble to secure access to the resources and technologies they need to compete. The competition is particularly fierce in the realm of artificial intelligence. AI has the potential to revolutionize everything from healthcare and transportation to defense and finance. Whoever controls AI will have a significant advantage in the 21st century. This has led to a global race for AI talent, data, and computing power. The stakes are incredibly high, as the development of advanced AI systems raises profound ethical and geopolitical questions. The new trade war is not just about economics or technology, it's about the future of humanity itself. The opening salvos of this new trade war were perhaps fired not with tariffs but with infrastructure. China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, a modern-day Silk Road spanning continents, set off alarm bells in Western capitals. Here was China, pouring billions into developing nations, securing access to resources, and building influence far beyond its borders. The West saw this as a blatant power grab, a challenge to the existing global order. The United States, under the Trump administration, responded with its own infrastructure plans, aimed at countering China's growing influence. But the US efforts paled in comparison, both in scale and in scope. China, it seemed, was winning the infrastructure war, and with it, the hearts and minds of nations hungry for investment and development. This infrastructure competition laid bare the growing economic rivalry between the world's two largest economies, setting the stage for a trade war that would soon engulf the globe. As the world grappled with the urgent need to transition to cleaner energy, a new front opened up in the trade war: green technology. China, having invested heavily in renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, emerged as a global leader in the production of solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicle batteries. This dominance, however, did not sit well with the United States and other Western nations. They accused China of unfair trade practices, such as subsidizing its green tech industries and dumping products on the global market at artificially low prices. Tariffs were imposed, investigations launched, and accusations flew back and forth. The battle for green tech supremacy had become a proxy war for economic and technological dominance, with each side vying for control of the industries that would define the future of energy. The stakes were incredibly high, as the winner of this battle stood to reap enormous economic and geopolitical rewards. At the heart of the trade war lay a seemingly mundane but critically important component, the semiconductor. These tiny chips, the brains behind everything from smartphones and laptops to cars and fighter jets, became a major source of tension between the US and China. The United States, home to giants like Intel and Qualcomm, had long dominated the semiconductor industry, but China, determined to achieve technological independence, poured billions into developing its own domestic chip-making capabilities. This sparked fears in Washington that China could eventually overtake the US in this strategically vital sector. In response, the US imposed strict export controls, limiting China's access to advanced chip-making equipment and technology. This move, while aimed at stifling China's technological rise, also sent shockwaves through the global tech industry, disrupting supply chains and raising concerns about a potential chip shortage. The trade war reached a fever pitch under the Trump administration, which imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. China retaliated in kind, slapping tariffs on American products like soybeans and pork. The back-and-forth tariffs had a ripple effect throughout the global economy, disrupting supply chains, raising prices for consumers, and fueling uncertainty in financial markets. Beyond tariffs, the US and China also engaged in a tit-for-tat over technology transfer, intellectual property rights, and market access. The Trump administration accused China of forcing American companies operating in China to hand over valuable technology as a condition of doing business there. It also alleged that China was stealing intellectual property from American firms, costing the US economy billions of dollars annually. These accusations further inflamed tensions and made it increasingly difficult to find common ground. The trade war between the US and China, the world's two largest economies, sent shockwaves throughout the global trading system. Other nations caught in the crossfire faced difficult choices. Some, like the European Union, tried to chart a middle course, urging dialogue and de-escalation while also seeking to protect their own economic interests. Others, however, saw an opportunity to advance their own agendas. Russia, facing Western sanctions over its actions in Ukraine, deepened its economic ties with China. The two countries signed a raft of new energy deals, reducing their reliance on the US dollar and challenging the West's dominance in the global financial system. The trade war, rather than isolating China, seemed to be pushing it closer to other nations seeking to challenge the existing global order. As the trade war raged on, a new battleground emerged, one where the weapons were not tariffs or sanctions, but lines of code and silicon chips. The battle for technological supremacy, always simmering beneath the surface, erupted into the open, with artificial intelligence at its very core. This was not a battle for market share or profits, but for the very future of power itself. Whoever mastered the secrets of AI, it was believed, would hold the keys to the 21st century. The United States, long the world leader in technological innovation, viewed China's rapid advancements in AI with growing alarm. Chinese companies, fueled by massive government investment and access to vast troves of data, were making significant strides in facial recognition, natural language processing, and autonomous systems. The potential military applications of these technologies were particularly concerning to US defense planners who feared that China could soon erode America's technological edge. The battle lines were drawn, and the race for AI dominance was on. The escalating tech war between the United States and China claimed a high-profile casualty: NVIDIA, a Silicon Valley giant known for its powerful graphics processing units, essential components for AI development and deployment. In a move that sent shockwaves through the tech industry, the US government imposed restrictions on the export of NVIDIA's most advanced chips to China, citing concerns that they could be used to enhance China's military capabilities. The move was seen as a major escalation in the tech war, and it had immediate and far-reaching consequences. Nvidia, caught in the crossfire, faced the prospect of losing a significant chunk of its revenue, as China was a major market for its products. Chinese tech companies, meanwhile, scrambled to find alternative suppliers, fearing that their access to cutting-edge AI hardware would be cut off. The Nvidia case highlighted the delicate position of tech companies operating in a world increasingly divided by geopolitical rivalry. The battle for AI supremacy was not just a two-horse race between the United States and China. Other nations, recognizing the transformative potential of AI, were also investing heavily in research and development, eager to secure their place in the new technological order. The European Union, home to world-class research institutions and tech companies, sought to carve out its own path, promoting ethical AI development and seeking to become a regulatory powerhouse in the global AI landscape. Meanwhile, countries like Israel, Canada, and the United Kingdom were emerging as AI hotspots, attracting top talent and fostering innovation. The race for AI dominance was a global phenomenon, with each nation pursuing its own strategic goals and seeking to leverage AI to enhance its economic competitiveness, national security, and societal well-being. The competition was fierce, but it also fostered collaboration and knowledge sharing, as researchers around the world worked to unlock the full potential of AI. The European Union found itself in a particularly delicate position as the tech war intensified. On the one hand, the EU shared many of the United States' concerns about China's technological ambitions and its willingness to flout international norms and rules. On the other hand, the EU was also wary of becoming overly reliant on the US for its technological needs, particularly as the transatlantic relationship became increasingly strained under the Trump administration. The EU sought to chart a middle course, promoting dialogue and cooperation while also taking steps to protect its own economic and technological interests. It invested in its own AI research and development, implemented stricter data privacy regulations, and sought to forge closer tech ties with other like-minded nations. The EU's goal was to become a regulatory superpower in the global AI landscape, setting standards and shaping the ethical development and deployment of this transformative technology. The EU's approach, while challenging, reflected its commitment to multilateralism and its belief that global challenges required global solutions. Beyond the geopolitical and economic rivalries, the battle for AI supremacy also raised profound ethical questions. As AI systems became increasingly sophisticated, capable of making decisions that could have life-or-death consequences, concerns grew about the potential for bias, discrimination, and unintended consequences. The development of autonomous weapons systems, powered by AI, sparked particular alarm, with many experts warning of a future where machines, not humans, made decisions about who lived and who died. The race for AI dominance forced nations to confront these ethical dilemmas head-on. Should there be limits on the development and deployment of AI? Who should be held accountable when AI systems made mistakes? How could we ensure that AI benefited humanity as a whole, rather than just a select few? These were not just technological questions, but moral and philosophical ones that would shape the future of humanity in profound ways. The global thirst for energy has always been a driving force in geopolitics. But the battle for resources was undergoing a profound transformation. While oil and gas remained vital commodities, the race to secure the energy sources of the future was intensifying, adding a new layer of complexity to the already volatile global landscape. Renewable energy, once a niche sector championed by environmentalists, had become a strategic imperative, with nations vying for dominance in solar, wind, and other clean technologies. But the shift towards cleaner energy brought with it new challenges and new sources of conflict. The raw materials needed for solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicle batteries were often found in politically unstable or environmentally sensitive regions, sparking competition and raising concerns about resource nationalism and environmental degradation. The battle for energy was no longer just about controlling the flow of oil and gas, but about securing access to the minerals and metals that would power the 21st century. As the West sought to isolate Russia through sanctions and diplomatic pressure, Moscow found a willing partner in Beijing. The two countries, both facing increasing pressure from the United States and its allies, deepened their economic and energy cooperation, forging a strategic partnership that had the potential to reshape the global balance of power. Russia, with its vast reserves of oil and gas, found a ready market for its energy exports in China, which was eager to reduce its dependence on energy imports from the Middle East and other volatile regions. The energy alliance between Russia and China extended far beyond just oil and gas. The two countries also collaborated on nuclear power projects, joint ventures in renewable energy, and the development of new energy technologies. This burgeoning partnership, driven by both economic and geopolitical considerations, posed a direct challenge to the West's dominance in the global energy market. It also highlighted the limitations of using energy as a weapon, as Russia was able to mitigate the impact of Western sanctions by finding alternative markets and partners. Deep in the salt flats of South America, a new kind of gold rush was underway, one driven not by the allure of precious metals, but by the insatiable demand for lithium, a light silvery white metal that had become indispensable for electric vehicle batteries and renewable energy storage. Countries like Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia, sitting atop the world's largest lithium reserves, found themselves at the center of a global scramble for resources, with mining companies, investors, and governments all vying for a piece of the action. But the lithium boom brought with it a host of challenges, sparking social unrest, environmental concerns, and geopolitical tensions. Local communities, often marginalized and impoverished, protested the environmental impact of lithium mining, which required vast amounts of water and energy, and could contaminate local water sources. Governments, eager to capitalize on their lithium wealth, grappled with how to balance economic development with environmental protection and social equity. The lithium triangle of South America, once a remote and sparsely populated region, had become a microcosm of the global struggle for resources, highlighting the challenges and opportunities of the clean energy transition. As the value of natural resources soared, a wave of resource nationalism swept across the globe, with governments in resource-rich countries asserting greater control over their natural wealth. From Venezuela's oil fields to the Democratic Republic of Congo's cobalt mines, leaders sought to renegotiate contracts, nationalize industries, and keep a larger share of the profits from their country's natural endowments. This resurgence of resource nationalism was driven by a complex mix of factors, including economic inequality, political instability, and a desire for greater national autonomy. In many developing countries, decades of exploitation by foreign corporations had left a legacy of resentment and a determination to chart a new course. The global commodity boom of the early 21st century, fueled by rising demand from China and other emerging economies, provided these countries with the leverage to demand better terms and assert their sovereignty over their natural resources. This trend, while understandable, also raised concerns about investment stability and the potential for conflict. The trade war and the race for technological supremacy brought into sharp focus the strategic importance of rare earth elements, a group of 17 metals with exotic names like neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium. These obscure elements, once relegated to the footnotes of chemistry textbooks, had become indispensable for a wide range of technologies, including smartphones, electric vehicles, wind turbines, and guided missiles. China, which controlled the vast majority of the world's rare earth production and processing capacity, had used its dominance as leverage in trade negotiations, threatening to restrict exports or raise prices for countries that challenged its economic or geopolitical interests. This dependence on China for these critical materials set off alarm bells in Western capitals, prompting efforts to diversify supply chains, invest in domestic production, and develop alternative technologies that relied less on rare earths. The geopolitics of rare earths had become a high-stakes game of chess, with global implications. As the trade war between the United States and China raged on, a new bloc of powerful nations emerged, challenging the long-held dominance of the West. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, sought to reshape the global order to reflect their interests. They established the new development bank as an alternative to the World Bank and IMF, increasing cooperation in trade, investment, technology, and security. The rise of BRICS represented a significant shift in global power. The trade war and the economic might of China accelerated the rise of the global South. Developing countries demanded a greater voice, challenging the traditional North-South divide. Rapid economic growth and new technologies provided opportunities for leapfrogging development. Shared global challenges fostered solidarity, reshaping the global landscape. The weaponization of the US dollar in the global trade war, through sanctions and other financial measures, had a profound and unintended consequence. It accelerated the trend towards de-dollarization. Countries around the world, particularly those targeted by US sanctions or concerned about the potential for future economic coercion, began exploring alternatives to the US dollar in international trade and finance. This move away from the dollar was driven by a mix of economic and geopolitical considerations. Some countries sought to reduce their vulnerability to fluctuations in the US economy and the whims of US policymakers. Others saw an opportunity to chip away at the United States' global influence and promote the use of their own currencies in international transactions. And still others hoped that a more multipolar financial system with multiple reserve currencies would be more stable and equitable. The move towards de-dollarization, though in its early stages, had the potential to reshape the global financial order and challenge the dollar's long-held supremacy. As the global economy transitioned away from its dependence on the US dollar, several alternative reserve currencies emerged as potential contenders. The euro, the currency of the European Union, offered stability and liquidity, but its future remained uncertain amid economic challenges within the eurozone and political divisions among member states. The Chinese yuan, backed by the world's second-largest economy, had made significant strides in internationalization, with China actively promoting its use in trade and investment. However, concerns about capital controls, lack of transparency, and the Chinese government's influence over its currency limited its appeal as a truly global reserve currency. Other currencies, such as the Japanese yen, the British pound, and the Swiss franc, also played important roles in the global financial system, but lacked the scale and scope to challenge the dollar's dominance on their own. The emergence of new reserve currencies, while challenging the dollar's hegemony, was likely to lead to a more fragmented and complex global financial system. The new global trade war, with its tariffs, sanctions, and technological competition, raised concerns about the fragmentation of the global economy. As countries retreated behind their own borders, seeking to protect their domestic industries and reduce their reliance on rivals, the world risked sliding into a new era of economic balkanization, with potentially devastating consequences for global growth and stability. A fragmented global economy, characterized by competing blocs, restricted trade, and limited investment, would harm everyone. Consumers would face higher prices and reduced choices as access to goods and services from other countries became more limited. Businesses would face higher costs, reduced efficiency, and stifled innovation as global supply chains were disrupted, and opportunities for collaboration and knowledge sharing dwindled. And governments would face rising tensions, reduced cooperation, and an increased risk of conflict as economic rivalry spilled over into the political and security realms. The stakes were incredibly high, and the world stood at a crossroads, facing a choice between a future of cooperation and shared prosperity, or one of conflict and decline. While politicians and pundits debated the merits of tariffs and sanctions, the true cost of the new global trade war was being borne by ordinary people around the world. From farmers struggling to sell their crops to families grappling with rising prices, the impact of this economic conflict was being felt in homes and communities far removed from the halls of power. The trade war was not some abstract geopolitical game, but a force that was upending lives, disrupting livelihoods, and fueling uncertainty about the future. For many, the trade war meant lost jobs as factories closed, businesses shuttered, and industries dependent on global trade contracted. The tariffs imposed by both sides of the conflict disrupted supply chains, increased the cost of raw materials, and made it more difficult for businesses to compete. The uncertainty created by the trade war also made businesses hesitant to invest and hire, further dampening economic activity. The human toll of the trade war was often hidden from view, but no less real for those who were caught in its crosshairs. The interconnectedness of the global economy, once hailed as a triumph of globalization, became a vulnerability as the trade war disrupted the intricate web of supply chains that connected producers, manufacturers, retailers, and consumers around the world. Products that were once taken for granted, from cars and computers to clothing and food, became scarce or more expensive as tariffs, sanctions, and logistical bottlenecks created chaos in the global marketplace. Consumers, accustomed to a wide variety of goods at competitive prices, were confronted with rising prices, limited choices, and delays in obtaining the products they needed and desired. Businesses, dependent on reliable supply chains to operate efficiently and profitably, faced higher costs, production delays, and lost sales as they struggled to adapt to the new realities of the global trade war. The trade war exposed the fragility of the globalized economy, highlighting the risks of relying too heavily on a single supplier or a single trade route. The trade war's impact on the global semiconductor industry had far-reaching consequences, rippling through a wide range of industries and affecting consumers in unexpected ways. The global chip shortage, exacerbated by the trade war's disruption of supply chains and the escalating technological competition between the United States and China, led to production delays and shortages of everything from cars and trucks to smartphones and gaming consoles. Automakers, forced to idle factories and delay new model launches due to the lack of critical chips, saw their profits dwindle and their market share erode. Consumers, eager to buy new cars or upgrade their electronics, faced long wait times, inflated prices, and limited choices. The chip shortage highlighted the essential role of semiconductors in the modern economy and the vulnerability of global supply chains to disruption. It also underscored the need for greater investment in domestic chip manufacturing capacity and the importance of international cooperation in ensuring a stable and reliable supply of these critical components. While the trade war affected everyone, its impact was not felt equally. The poor and working class, already struggling to make ends meet, bore the brunt of rising prices, job losses, and economic uncertainty. The wealthy, with their greater financial resources and access to alternative markets, were better able to weather the storm, further exacerbating the growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. The trade war's regressive effects were felt most acutely in developing countries, where millions of people were already living in poverty, and where social safety nets were often weak or non-existent. Rising food prices driven by tariffs on agricultural goods and disruptions to global food supply chains pushed millions more into hunger and malnutrition. The loss of manufacturing jobs, as factories closed or relocated to countries with lower labor costs, further eroded the economic prospects of the world's poorest citizens. The trade war, rather than promoting shared prosperity, was exacerbating global inequality and fueling social unrest. The trade war's disruption of global agricultural markets and its impact on food prices raised concerns about a potential global food crisis. The interconnectedness of the global food system, once seen as a source of resilience, became a vulnerability as tariffs, sanctions, and logistical bottlenecks disrupted the flow of food from producers to consumers. Countries that were heavily reliant on food imports, particularly in regions already facing food insecurity due to conflict, climate change, or economic instability, were particularly vulnerable. The trade war's impact on food security went beyond just rising prices. It also disrupted agricultural production, as farmers faced uncertainty about market access, volatile input costs, and reduced investment. The trade war also hampered international cooperation on food security issues, as countries prioritized their own national interests over collective action to address shared challenges. The world, already grappling with the challenge of feeding a growing population in the face of climate change, could ill afford the added burden of a trade war that threatened to undermine global food security. The new global trade war, fought not with tanks and troops but with tariffs, sanctions and technology, has reshaped the global landscape in profound ways. The old certainties of the post-Cold War era, with its emphasis on free trade, globalization and U.S. hegemony, have given way to a more uncertain and contested world order. The rise of China, the resurgence of Russia, the growing assertiveness of the global South, and the proliferation of new technologies have all converged to create a complex and rapidly evolving geopolitical chessboard. The future of global trade hangs in the balance. Will the world retreat into protectionism and economic nationalism, leading to fragmentation, stagnation, and conflict? Or will nations find a way to cooperate and compete constructively, forging a new era of shared prosperity and global stability? The answers to these questions will depend on the choices that leaders and citizens make in the years to come. The stakes are incredibly high as the world grapples with the challenges of climate change, pandemics, inequality, and technological disruption. The future is not predetermined, it is ours to shape. The new global trade war has exposed vulnerabilities of a hyper-connected world, where economic shocks reverberate across borders with lightning speed. The choice is clear: cooperation or conflict, shared prosperity or shared decline. Cooperation offers hope for a stable, equitable, and sustainable future. The choice is ours. Let us choose wisely.